Zoro, the embodiment of pure willpower, a monster who reached the top of the world with only his swords and his ambition. But what if he had a helping hand? What would happen if the man who seeks to become the world's greatest swordsman ate a devil fruit? Would he become unstoppable? Or would he lose the very essence of what makes him Zoro? Today, we'll give him a fruit and see the chaos that would ensue. This isn't just a power-up theory. It's a character analysis. We'll explore how a power he never wanted would force Zoro to redefine his honor, his strength, and his very dream. Prepare to meet a Zoro you never imagined. Imagine the swordsman who refuses any shortcuts being forced to wield a power that goes against everything he believes in. How would he react when he realizes his blade is no longer the only instrument of his strength? And above all, would the real Zoro still exist under the weight of this new power?
First, let's establish a fundamental rule. Zoro hates shortcuts. His entire philosophy is based on surpassing one's limits through infernal training and willpower. For him, the path of the swordsman is one of purity and discipline. Ingesting a devil fruit would, in his mind, be cheating. He would see it as a crutch, a stain on his honor as a swordsman. We saw this when he refused Shisui until he proved his worth, and in his dedication to mastering Enma, a sword that drained his very life force. So, for this scenario to happen, it wouldn't be by choice. It would have to be an accident. Imagine the scene. The crew is starving, Luffy cooks a mess, and in the middle of the food, unbeknownst to anyone, there's a devil fruit. And who, besides Luffy, would eat anything without a second thought? Zoro. He would take a bite, complain about the awful taste, and suddenly, the power would manifest. Sanji would mock him for becoming a hammer unable to swim, and Zoro, furious with himself, would have to accept this new reality. From that moment on, his journey would no longer be simply about becoming the strongest, but about mastering this unwanted power and integrating it into his path of the sword, proving that he was still the master, not the fruit. He would feel betrayed by the promise he made to Kuina that he would become the greatest swordsman with his own strength and skill. This internal conflict would haunt him, adding a layer of psychological complexity to his relentless pursuit of power. It would be the beginning of a new struggle, not against an external enemy, but against himself. Each time he used the fruit's power, he would feel the weight of shame and doubt. But at the same time, this pain would drive him to prove that even with a cursed power, his soul was still that of a true swordsman. But which fruit would it be? It couldn't be just any fruit. It needs to be one that complements your style, not replaces it.
Many theorize that the perfect fruit for Zoro would be Baby Five's Buki Buki no Mi, weapon fruit, which would allow him to transform his body into blades. But that would be redundant and, frankly, insulting. Zoro doesn't want to be a sword, he wants to master the sword. Others suggest a logia, like the wind, or a mythical zonin, like a demon. But that would overshadow his swordsmanship. No. The perfect fruit for Zoro is one that amplifies his greatest ability and reflects his demonic nature. That would be the Kage Kage no Mi, Gecko Moria's shadow fruit. Think about it. The Kage Kage no Mi allows the user to control their own shadow, transforming it into a tangible duplicate. Now imagine Zoro, the master of Santoryu, three-sword style, using this fruit. He could manifest his shadow as a second swordsman, fighting alongside him. He would no longer be wielding 3 swords, he would be wielding 6. It would be the natural and terrifying evolution of his style. He could create a shadow clone to protect his companions while he focuses on the main enemy, or use the 6 swords to create an unstoppable tornado of steel. Furthermore, The shadow is the manifestation of darkness, which ties in perfectly with his demonic aura and his epithet, King of Hell. The shadow is not a new weapon, it is a reflection of himself, an extension of his own will and technique. This would allow him to maintain his purity as a swordsman, for he would still be fighting with swords, just with more of them.
And imagine the aesthetics of this. Zoro surrounded by a shadowy mist, his shadow wielding swords with the same fury and precision as he does. It would be like watching two demons duel in perfect synchrony, each blow echoing like the roar of a soul forged in hell. This power would not change who Zoro is. It would only reveal what he has always been, a force of darkness shaped by honor and the blade. If the image of a six-sword Zoro fighting alongside his own demonic shadow left you speechless, then help our channel emerge from the shadows. Like us to show your support. And if you don't want to miss any sharp theories like this, subscribe to One Piece Secrets and join our dojo. With the Kage Kage no Mi, Zoro's role in the crew and in the world would change drastically. He would no longer be just the combat-focused right-hand man. He would become a tactical force. At a basic level, his attack power would double. Techniques like the Ichidai Sanzen Daisen Sekai would become even more devastating. But true power would come with awakening. Awakening the Kage Kage no Mi would likely allow him to not only control his shadow, but perhaps infuse his will, the conqueror's haki, within it, creating a clone almost as strong as himself. Or, even more terrifying, imagine if he could apply the Asura technique to his shadow. We'd have not just one nine-sword Zoro, but two, for a total of 18. It would be a sight that would make even Mihawk raise an eyebrow. Against enemies like the Admirals, he could use his shadow to create distractions, block attacks, or attack from multiple angles simultaneously. He would become the most versatile fighter in the crew after Luffy. The dynamic with Sanji would be hilarious. Sanji would call him the trickster swordsman, and Zoro would retort that even with the extra power, he still needs more skill to control 6 swords than Sanji does to control his 2 legs. The balance of power within the monster trio would be redefined, with Zoro perhaps even temporarily surpassing Luffy in raw destructive power. He could even use his shadow.
But this new strength would also carry a burden. Each time he used his shadow, Zoro would feel like he was sharing his soul with something less than human. And deep down, he would wonder if he was still the swordsman he swore to be, or if the power of darkness had begun to sharpen his will as much as his blades. But all this power would come at a price Zoro might not be willing to pay. The greatest impact wouldn't be physical, but psychological. Zoro would have to deal with the frustration of possessing power he hadn't earned through sweat. Each victory would be tainted by doubt. Did I win because of my skill or because of the fruit? This would force him to train even harder, pushing his body and swordsmanship to an even more insane level in a desperate attempt to make up for the shortcut he'd been forced to take. His rivalry with Mihawk would also change profoundly. He could no longer challenge him as a pure swordsman. He would have to admit that he wields the power of a devil fruit. Mihawk, a blade purist, might even consider him unworthy of the title. Zoro's journey to become the world's greatest swordsman would become infinitely more complex. He would have to prove not only that he was the strongest, but that his mastery of the sword was so absolute that the fruit's power was merely an accessory, not the source of his strength. His new goal would be to defeat Mihawk using only his 3 swords, keeping his shadow inactive, the ultimate test of his honor. Zoro's internal struggle would become as fierce as any external battle. He might even develop a certain contempt for devil fruit users, seeing them as dependent on their powers, a projection of his own insecurity and guilt. And that's when Zoro would become truly fearsome,
a man torn between pride and power, between honor and curse. His shadow would be his ally, but also his mirror, always reminding him of the price he paid for a power he never wanted. And perhaps deep down, the true enemy he would need to defeat.
So what would happen if Zoro ate a devil fruit? He would become a monster of unimaginable power, a six-sword demon capable of wiping out entire armies with a single blow. The world's balance of power would be shaken, and even the mightiest pirates and admirals would tremble before his presence. But with this power would come a burden, the weight of a gift he never wanted, the stain on his honor, and a new obstacle on his path to the top. Zoro would have to fight not only his enemies, but also fate itself, which tried to force a shortcut on his journey. In the end, this hypothesis only reinforces why Zoro is as legendary as he is. He doesn't need a devil fruit. His strength comes not from a magical fruit, but from an unbreakable will, forged in blood, sweat, and tears. He is living proof that an ordinary human being, driven by a dream and absurd determination, can reach the level of the gods. And that's why, even though the six-sword Zoro is an incredible idea, the three-sword Zoro we know will always be the true king of hell. His lack of a devil fruit isn't a weakness. It's the ultimate symbol of his purity as a warrior, the ultimate representation of his faith in self-effort. He's the gold standard of human strength in the world of One Piece. But what about you? Which devil fruit do you think would suit Zoro? Leave your opinion in the comments, like the video, and subscribe for more theories and secrets from the world of One Piece. See you in the next One Piece Secrets video.